Today on For What It's Nerd, we're discussing Doomsday, Lilo and Stitch, and the studio. And let's get into it. There's a lot to discuss about these three. Let's start with the kind of quickest one, which is the Doomsday Secret Wars being delayed. This comes like kind of just, it came out of nowhere, really. People had kind of expected it because this movie is going to be a big movie, as we all know. And it really, I think the delay is necessary. It really, it matters that this movie is done right. It matters that the big event, the tent pole of the franchise at the moment, is done correctly. And there's a lot of hype around this movie, especially with Thunderbolts succeeding. Fantastic Four looks to be going the same way. It looks like people are going to be really back into Marvel going into Doomsday. And so if you have this movie that flops thereafter, you might kind of have the death knell for the MCU. That's not kind of a Doomsday, ironically, phrase, but I think it's worth saying that, you could end up with a scenario where these movies could flop, Doomsday and Secret Wars, if you don't take the time you need with them and kind of get them right. So they're both delayed. They were both meant to be in May, respectively, of their year. So May 2026 and May 2027. They are now both in December. And what's interesting about this, actually, is that December slot has kind of been empty since they moved Star Wars movies out of those slots a few years back. And I'm kind of interested to see how that does for a Marvel movie. That slot actually worked for Star Wars, in my opinion, for a few years there, and they kind of changed it up with Solo and kind of messed with it a little bit, and then they kind of haven't really brought anything else out since. But I kind of liked that December slot for Star Wars. It kind of kept you excited for the end of the year. So let's see how that one goes. But I do think it's very interesting that has come about, and it wasn't really given in a kind of open statement, so to speak. It was announced, but through media channels. It wasn't like Marvel itself, as far as I saw, didn't put out a statement specifically. So that's really interesting in a way. I wonder if they're almost kind of ashamed of the pushback in a way, which is weird, but it does happen where you kind of like you want to let someone report on that rather than talking about it yourself, because it's easier to have that report go out than you kind of go, hey guys, we're pushing it back because we don't feel we're going to be ready in time. But it's funny, if you're in the gaming sphere, this kind of thing is very common. A lot of games get delayed a lot of the time, and movies do get delayed too, but I think a lot less than games do. So I think if you're used to gaming, you're kind of aware of these kind of pushbacks. You know that they happen a lot, and I think this is because they've only just started really filming, and a year to get this all ready. A big movie like this is going to be a lot. So that's what they've done there. Clearly, that is where we're at with Doomsday. This gives me a bit more faith in these movies. So we'll see how that goes. Now, with that said, let's talk about The Studio next. The Studio is a show that is a comedy on Apple TV, and the idea of the show is that Matt Remick is a studio head, and the Matt Remick is played by Seth Rogen, and he is trying to make the movies that he really wants to make, the movies that matter. More your kind of artistic Barbie rather than your Disney remake, which ironically we're going to be coming on to shortly. But things get in his way, people get in his way. There's egos about. He has to make compromises, and he is a very awkward character unto himself, and those things all come together to usually conspire against him. And the way they've made that show, actually, I think is insanely good. It reminds me of the idea of what the MCU is trying to go do with WandaVision to a degree. In that, you have each episode kind of trying to do something different to reference, like there's one that references kind of detective movies. There's one that kind of references like your kind of like more actiony movie. There's ones that are dealing with like AI and like gender and race politics and like really interesting way of kind of hitting the topics that so often come up when we're talking about movies and talking about film and TV shows. And like even down to like the Marvel kind of conundrum and like how people don't really care if it's not a cape, or like if the movie can't be too long, because it'll impact screening times and stuff like that. It's really interesting. And more to the point, the fact that they've kind of introduced so many directors and actors into this to kind of really make it feel like it's authentic. Phenomenal. I have actually enjoyed every single episode. If you guys haven't watched it, definitely do watch it. There's going to be a season 2 already. Just funny from start to finish. I will say the season finale wasn't as strong as I was hoping it was going to be. The episode before the finale, like the penultimate episode, really set up this idea, and you just kind of had this idea that things are going to go really badly, and like it was going to just push Matt Remick into a whole new direction and really cause him an issue. And so for me personally, what I had thought was that if we're venturing a little bit into spoiler territory, but in the episode before, Griffin Mill, the head of the studio above Matt Remick, like the kind of the board, the guy on the board, is like, well, he takes a lot of drugs essentially, and he ends up unwell and is kind of going AWOL, and they're trying to get him ready to present the next day alongside all these other people that they're trying to get to present. Dave Franco, who is drunk out of his mind and also high, and then you have Zoe Kravitz, who is the same way, and then you have like the kind of rank and file, the main characters of the show, trying to kind of get these people ready to do this big performance, because otherwise they're going to be sold to Amazon, which is hilarious unto itself. But the episode kind of pulls back from all of those kind of whoa, like, because you think in 1 minute you think Griffin Mill's going to die, you think, oh, what if they do get sold to Amazon? You get this idea of like, oh, there's a character who previously ran the studio where Seth Rogen's character now is, played by Catherine O'Hara, and she seems to kind of be like trying to get revenge, and then she realizes what's happening and kind of pulls back from it. And there's just loads of promises. It's like Chekhov's gun, but it doesn't happen in this last episode. And I kind of wish they had killed off Griffin Mill, even though he's played by Bryan Cranston, who I love. Bryan Cranston, great in anything he does. But do you know what? I don't want Bryan Cranston to be out of the show, but I think what would have been really good is if they killed Griffin Mill, made Matt Remick have to take Griffin Mill's job, further pushing him away from the creativity he's trying to, promote in Hollywood, and promote one of the other people who he's then trying to micromanage to do what he wanted them to do, and kind of dealing with the idea that he's got even further up the ladder, but he's further away from his goals than he had been previously, even more so than when he had been kind of like a higher executive than the kind of the head of the studio. So for me personally, I think they kind of shied back from the edge a little bit, but at the same time, I'm definitely excited to see more. I definitely want to see a season 2. I think the premise of the show itself, commenting on all of these very important issues, regards film, but also regards just art in general, is really worthwhile. And I think I'm excited to see more. Definitely excited to see more. So keep an eye out for more on the studio, and definitely watch it if you haven't already. And then lastly, kind of quite a good segue, actually, talking about remakes and stuff like that, Disney's Lilo and Stitch. Now, I don't know what to say about this movie. I think people are blowing it out of proportion. I think there's some things that are not right with this movie. It definitely doesn't take the same approach as the original. These movies rarely do, and they usually water down the original message. Admittedly, this does that too. And in some parts, I think that doesn't... It's not just that it doesn't translate well, it's that it actually ruins the original message. And it feels like this movie... in parts, undermines the kind of Hawaiian experience to me. I think there's certain people who are right in what they're saying regards that. Even the fact that they didn't have an actress for Nani who was representative of Nani as a character was ironic in and of itself. It felt like there was some things that I would have done a little bit differently in this movie to, even with the script that they have, make it come across better, if that makes sense. But let's talk about the script that they have. They change a few things in the story. First off, and this is a big one, they remove Gantu altogether. Now, Gantu was one of my favorite characters of the original movie, because he is this like dogged character who just does not understand what he's getting himself into, and he's working for the Grand Councilwoman, and he so despises Stitch by the end of the movie, he ends up working for Hamsterville in the preceding show and the preceding movies. And the fact that is kind of like he's a character who he mirrors Jumba. And it's ironic that I say that because you guys will see what I'm talking about there in a minute. But he mirrors Jumba in that he goes from like a lawkeeper into someone who essentially becomes a villainous character. And Jumba is this evil mad scientist who, by the end of the movie, is meant to be this kind of good character, right? Or at least able to kind of better understand morality, right? Whereas in this, you have Gantu gone. Gantu is not in the movie at all, which is really a shame. I love, like, even the design of Gantu is really cool, right? And like the side of him always gave a little bit more of the villainous kind of aspect of the movie, the kind of oppressive aspect of this kind of alien invasion, so to speak. They kind of really remove that, and on top of that, they make Jumba the villain. They take the idea of what Gantu is and smush it into Jumba. And going back to what I was saying before, because of that, Jumba never gets any character development. He starts out as an evil scientist and ends as an eviler scientist, so to speak. He kind of makes it clear that he was wanting this all to happen so that he could keep 626 and make 627, which, again, another Chekhov's gun put on the table that doesn't happen, because they talk about 627 at the end of the movie, and you think, oh, is he going to turn into 627? Which we know happened. Like, there's a version of Stitch that's created, well, a version of an experiment created later that is 627. But like, you wonder if he's going to kind of somehow change Stitch to be 627, and then Lilo talks him back down, and that kind of could have been a cool conceit. But they didn't do that. They didn't really do anything with most of the characters in the movie. Do I feel like it still tries to have the heart of the original? Yes. Do I feel like some of that actually works still? Yes. Do I feel like the beginning of the movie actually didn't feel dissimilar to the original? Yes. But it feels as soon as Jumba and Pleakley land on Earth, that's when it goes downhill. Because those characters have been changed fundamentally. They clearly didn't want to use CGI as much as they... And I think that's the reason why Gantu is not in the movie for a start. But they clearly didn't want to use as much CGI as possible, so they got rid of Jumba and Pleakley turn into humans halfway through the movie. And as well as that, Jumba doesn't have his accent in this, right? And because he doesn't have his accent, he just has none of the gravitas that he does in the original. And it's just Zach Galifianakis being Zach Galifianakis. And not even that, really. And just the voice doesn't match Jumba. Jumba doesn't match Jumba, essentially. And that's the biggest... I think that's the most egregious part of this. I feel like all the other parts sort of work to a degree, apart from at the end. And I think that is one part where I did kind of sit there and go, what? And the ending being that instead of kind of like Nani and Lilo kind of resolving the situation, but still kind of working at their imperfect scenario, their imperfect situation of being, but what's perfect to them in their own sense. There's this kind of moment of like, oh, well, Nani's just going to go off and do her marine biology course and leave Lilo with David and his grandmother, which is being made for this movie, by the way. Which, to be fair, she wasn't the worst character ever created. Like an original character, she was quite funny. She had a few funny moments. But like they introduced a grandmother figure for David so that they could give Lilo off to that grandmother figure and David whilst Nani was away at marine biology college or university or whatever you want to call it. And that did feel a bit weird. Like she basically handed her sister off to nobodies. Like, not nobodies, that's the wrong word, but like she handed her sister off to like, again, not strangers, because they do kind of imply that they're family, and you know, Nani and David have their kind of relationship, etc. But yeah, it was a very weird ending. Do I think that this movie deserves all the hate it's getting? No. Do I think it's the best remake they've done? No. Do I think it's one of the worst they've done? I can't comment because I haven't watched them all. But I don't think it deserves the critical success that it's getting, regards the box office, etc. equally, I don't think it is as bad as it seems. And also, and I think this is the important thing we always need to remember about these remakes, the original movie is not gone. The original movie is still there. The original movie, like, if like, yes, kids might watch this version, but there will always be the original version. And if people feel that resonates more, you can show your kids that version. It is on Disney Plus. I'm pretty sure it's on Disney Plus. I'm saying off the top of my head, I'd assume it's on Disney Plus. But yeah, does it ruin for me any potential sequels? Yes, because you had so many ideas and premises with the show that you could definitely make a movie or two more if you had kept more true to the original story. But again, I think it swings and roundabouts. I think these remakes are what they are. They're always going to be lesser than the originals. And we kind of just, if you accept that and go into it and kind of watch it through new eyes and kind of accept that they're going to be a bit different, you can enjoy it to a degree. But I do think that removing Gantu, making Jumbo the main villain, changing Nani's trajectory in the story, and making her kind of the secret protagonist in this. Lilo was always the protagonist in the original. Lilo and then Stitch, of course, as the name of the movie. But Nani is kind of the protagonist in this movie in a way. They've kind of changed the focus, and it does kind of undermine the message a little bit, but I think at other points it kind of helps. How do I put it? I feel like it's almost an alternate version reality where in the original, Nani has Lilo's best interests at heart, and she sacrifices anything for her sister. And I think that's a good message. That's it's an important message to think, I will do what I need to do for my family. Very good. I think this movie shows that sometimes sacrificing everything for your family is not always the best idea. However, the way that they frame that makes it look somewhat selfish, if that makes sense. Somewhat of a dream breaker to children. Somewhat of a like there's a moment in the movie where Nani is talking about reality and like Lilo needs to come back to reality, and it kind of mirrors their original relationship in the first go around of the movie. But the way it's kind of done, I feel like if a kid was watching that movie, they would maybe not feel great about that moment. At least that's how I see it. So again, I found that there was good moments in the movie. I enjoyed the movie, generally speaking. Do I think it's the best movie I've ever seen? No. Do I think it's the best Disney remake I've ever seen? No. Do I think it's better than the original? Definitely not. And yeah, I kind of feel like that's where I'm at with that one. I was going to as well in this episode... let me try that again. I was going to as well in this episode discuss Doctor Who, because Doctor Who has brought back some old characters, which if you brought them back a few series ago, I probably would have been really, really excited, because they brought back the Rani, and they're bringing back Omega, and there was a little part where Carol Ann Ford's Susan Foreman came back as well, and so I'm assuming she's going to come back in some way at some point more fully. But yeah, I meant to kind of catch up because I haven't watched any of this season. Now this season's finishing, I believe either it finished last night or it's finishing the week coming. I didn't look too far into it, but I haven't had a chance. So hopefully, if it is next week that the finale is, I'll try and catch up before then, and that might be next week's episode discussing Doctor Who, season 2, so to speak. Even though it's like season a million at this point. But yeah, so that is it for this episode of For What It's Nerd. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you did, let me know, and let me know what you guys thought about all these shows / movies / news in general. And we'll be back soon for more. Until then, guys, thank you for listening and watching as always. I'll see you later.